What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to Ask Guillermo Benitez. I know the intro video had terrible audio. I was half asleep and I didn't check the audio on the mic. I fixed it, and hopefully you can tell I'm a little more awake than I was in that video. Anyway, I'll proceed with recording. You know, that's the purpose of me doing this anyway. I'm here to answer your question. So we'll get into the first question. This particular question was posed by a friend of mine from my time in Mars Hill, Benjamin McIntyre. His question is, do Paul's epistles show more of a Hebraic or a Grecian epistemology? How should one approach these differences, and what would be the significance of those differences in our theological deductions from his writings? Okay, now to answer this multi-question, which actually seems like a seminary question, it could hypothetically take a very long time, and I'll try my best to be brief. Hopefully I'm not doing Benjamin's homework for him. But seriously, hopefully my answer will actually suffice and make sense, and maybe it'll even evoke more questions, which I have no problem researching and trying to answer them to the best of my ability. Let's see, Merriam-Webster.com defines epistemology as the study or theory of the nature and grounds of knowledge, especially with reference to its limits and validity. In other words, epistemology is how someone's life experiences have shaped their worldview. So basically, it's like what you've been through shapes what you know, or how you know, or how people actually listen to you. Say, for example, somebody who's 17 trying to give married advice or advice about having kids. And it's like somebody who's 35, been married 8 years, has 2 or 3 kids. They're gonna be like, "Little kid, what are you talking about? You don't understand. Get out of here." You know what I mean? So that can be examples of different epistemologies and how epistemology plays out in our actual lives. Basically, just to get back into Paul's epistemology specifically, he was born in Tarsus, which is in modern day Turkey. Google Maps won't map it as far as the distance between Tarsus and Jerusalem. However, I found another map that shows that it's about 355 miles if you're on a flight, straight from one place to the other, from point A to point B. It doesn't give really much as far as driving distance or walking distance. Excuse me. In any sense, this shows that Paul was in the Diaspora, which means another concept that I have to explain. I apologize for bringing up so many new concepts and really not yet getting into the actual heart of the discussion here. But just to kind of give you a background, the Diaspora means someone who was born, like say for example, if your parents were Americans but they were stationed in Germany or something, and you're born there, that would be kind of like an example of what a diaspora looks like. You're born in diaspora because your bloodline is here, but when you were born, when you were growing up, you were starting kindergarten or whatever, you're in a different place than where your ancestry is from. So that's kind of the mentality of this diaspora. Even so, Shaul was born in diaspora. He was circumcised on the 8th day, like actually the law dictates that all Jewish boys must be. He was given the name Shaul. It's unclear whether or not he was named after the king who ruled Jerusalem before David. But what we do know for certain is that he was a Roman citizen by proxy of his birth. For proof, we see that in Acts chapter 22. As such, he was entitled to an education in Greco-Roman schools. This would have implied that he knew Greek from an early age. This also would have implied that he knew how to write epistles from an early age. He knew that format, that template, if you will, that most Hebrew boys wouldn't have seen or wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have had any idea to. They wouldn't have been privy to it. and that would have been an elementary skill for him. And he uses skill quite often. I mean, you see 13 books of the New Testament are attributed to Paul, and all of those are epistles. So, being that he had that experience, that did put him at an advantage over Peter, James, John, and the rest of the Jerusalem apostles. Regardless, there's no doubt that he was raised in a Jewish home. He would have been taught Hebrew from his youth, and he would have longed for Jerusalem to be vibrant and autonomous in Judaism. Here's another topic that I can kind of get on a tangent about, but just reining it in, and I'll just say that his parents would have spared no expense to keep his socio-religious heritage paradigmatic and fundamental, and at the forefront of his development. They wouldn't have wanted him to get sidetracked, because the Greek culture has like a pantheon, multiple gods. Judaism is one God, monotheistic. So just that contrasts, if nothing else. But there were other things, but that, among other things, his parents would have said, no, you can't be part of this. I want you to focus on the religion, the ancestry, the traditions of our ancestry. And it may have even, fostered some type of resentment against Greco-Roman culture, or the rule or influence. And we do see traces of this, not so much in Paul, but in others in the New Testament, where you see the tax collectors, and you see how hated they are by the people. It goes more, it's deeper than just the fact that they collected too much taxes. There's a lot more that, just trying to stick to answering Benjamin's question, I really don't have time to get into. But in any sense, as an adult, Shaul would have become a Pharisee, and he even states something about this in Philippians 3. He talks about how he was a Hebrew among Hebrews. He was born, he was circumcised on the 8th day. He was of the tribe of Benjamin, as concerning the law, a Pharisee, concerning zeal, persecuting the church. He just kind of going on about how he was so accomplished and decorated among his people, but when the time came when he met Jesus, it shifted his paradigm. He had devoted his life, even to the point of trying to eradicate this Jesus movement, as it were. That's what it was called. That's what it was called in that time. And Paul he saw it as a blasphemous heresy. He saw it as foolishness. He saw it as, who does this Jesus think he is? He's going to purify. He's going to rebuild the temple in 3 days. What's he talking about? It took our ancestors 46 years to build this temple. What makes him think he can just rebuild it in 3 days? That's nonsense. That's the attitude he would have had towards Jesus, and Jesus' words, and Jesus following the people. Saul, as we see with Acts chapter 8, he was in charge of the stoning of Stephen. I don't know if you have time to read it. Just want to pause the video, fine, and go read that, and then come back. That's cool. Saul was overseer of the one when they stoned Stephen. The people placed their coats at his feet, which basically said, "Yes, sir." That's their way of submission to Paul. But he wasn't Paul at this point. He's not known by the name Paul until the next chapter. It's when an unstoppable force meets an immovable wall. That's Acts chapter 9. Feel free to go read it. Pause the video and come back. I'll be here. In any sense, after his conversion, he changed his name to Paul, which means little. That's to signify, the mentality of not my will but your will. Not the mentality that John the Baptist had when he had his fame and his reputation was immense, and Jesus was coming, and John said, "I must decrease, he must increase." It was a deferment to the one who was and is to come. You know, in any sense, that's what Saul renaming himself Paul was. Now that you know a little bit of his background in epistemology, I want to attempt to answer Benjamin's question on how Paul's epistemology should affect our understanding and dissemination of his New Testament epistles. Now, like I said, his epistemology was clearly Hebraic, to use the term Benjamin used. It was dipped in Greco-Roman culture, like I said, because he had that Greco-Roman education. He used the epistles. He wrote in Greek. He knew Greek. He wrote his letters. Scholars, they typically can't agree on much of anything, but they generally state that he was converted between 33 and 37. And it's generally agreed that his death was in or before the year 64. Alright, with that being said, bear that in mind, and also think about the fact that the next year the Gospel of Mark was written. That was the first of our 4 Gospels. About a decade later, Matthew's Gospel surfaces. About a decade later, the Greek physician named Luke writes his Gospels in the book of Acts. And then maybe another decade and a half after that, John, the elder, being locked away on the Isle of Patmos, writes his Gospel. So, you see, it's like, if it wasn't for Paul, if he hadn't been converted, and he hadn't, if he hadn't changed, if Jesus hadn't changed him, the Jesus movement, the way, it was internally known as the way, and the Jews who didn't like it called it the Jesus movement. In any sense, had Paul not been converted when he was, it would have either wiped out totally, or definitely would have been missing one of the key builders, from the beginning, from its baby stages. So let's, stepping outside of it, looking back on it, as much as Shaul loved Judaism, and as much as he excelled in his precepts, as much as he was concerned about the purity of the posterity of Father Abraham and their adherence to Torah, and as much as he loved the experiences of the prophets and the lessons we learned from that, as much as he loved the lessons we learned from the wisdom of the writings, the Psalms, the Proverbs, the Song of Solomon, the minor prophets, so on and so forth, when he met Jesus on that road to Damascus, everything was pointless. We see it and again I just point to Philippians 3 verses 3 through 11, because that really sums up the way that Paul counts everything else as garbage compared to the knowledge of Christ, and really just laying down everything you have for Christ. Because he realized that he was trying to purify something that Christ had already purified. Jesus was the sacred lamb, the Passover lamb takes away the sins of the world. And it's like, once the sins of the world are taken away, why would you try to keep trying to take the sins away? It's like, it's like you can't use a remote control if the batteries are gone. You know what I mean? It's like you have to, rather than sit and keep trying to take away sins and trying to make something happen that's already happened, really all you can do is give glory to the one who already did what you've spent your life trying to do. And so that's what Paul did. On his own right, he was the guy with 2 or 3 doctorates, the ridiculous salary, and he gave it all away for Christ's sake. Some would try to take this as like a self-abasement, so humble that you don't know how to, you can't even let yourself smile because you're just like, woe is me, I have to be. That's not what Jesus intended. And it's a lesson I learned personally myself just recently, is that, I tried so hard to be humble that I was really being self-abasing. And That's not what Jesus intended. Now, granted, He does want us to deny ourselves, take up our cross, follow Him. But there's still joy there. There's still peace. There's still relaxation. It's not. I mean, technically, it is a death sentence to take up your cross, but there's comfort in knowing the purpose for which you're doing it. Because if you're crucified with Christ, then you'll also be resurrected with Christ. So what that means is we have a hope within our souls, brighter than the perfect day. God has given us His Spirit, and He wants the world to hear it. All our doubts are passed away. Like the song says. So, maybe, and the lifestyle that He wants us to live, really, even though we die to our flesh, what that means that we die to our selfishness. Colossians 3 is an excellent way to see the new life in Christ. The fact that it's 3 a.m. right now, and I'm just trying to answer this question in a concise manner, and I don't want this video to be 45 minutes long. I'll just kind of say, check out the scripture, and then feel free to come back, pause it, and come back if you like. Some people, after they read this, they're like, it seems like some kind of socialist, old school, archaic way of doing things. But these seemingly socialist principles were embedded in Judaism for thousands of years, and even with passages like Leviticus 19 verses 9 and 10, it's not about socialism so much as it is about human interdependence. And not to get all political, because that's not my goal, that's not what I'm trying to do at all, but just to kind of make a little side note about socialism. Socialism only is a problem if you got like a fascist dictator at the helm who has all the resources, and everybody down at the bottom is just socialist and got no resources. Because the purpose of socialism is to share everything equally. If you look at the first generation church, nobody had any possessions of their own. Everybody shared everything equally, so everybody was on one accord. And the people who were the bishops, the overseers, that's what the word bishop actually means. Those people, it's actually a Greek word, episkopos, where the Episcopalian church comes from. Anyway, the episkopos, the overseers, were righteous judges. So basically, they didn't. Well, I'm gonna keep all the money for myself, and I'm just gonna let y'all starve, and I'm gonna eat scraps, and I'm sitting here eating steaks and whatnot. It wasn't that type of thing. So, that's why socialism gets a bad rap, because of Stalin and Hitler and dictators like that who really drew the contrast of the caste system. If we look at biblical community, it's not only, I don't even consider it socialism. I look at the example of the Jewish kibbutz. It's the Jewish word for community. That's what Jesus really was going for. That's what Paul, who came after, really tried to teach, and you'll see it's evidenced in Colossians 3. It's really about how working together, not overburdening the land, not overburdening each other, truly being Amhars, people of the land. To the point where, it's fine to have technology, but it's also smart to use it in a way. Like, say for example with Bluetooth, they got all these studies going on that say Bluetooth is bad for you. I'm bad for myself. I have Bluetooth in my ear. Y'all probably seen me. Who know me probably seen me with the Bluetooth in my ear. It's like technology is a good thing. It's convenient. My wife wants to call me. She's talking to me. I can hear her, but I can keep typing. I got the hands free. I'm good. Typing, whatever. But at the same time, you think about how much radiation goes in. It's like, is this Bluetooth really worth it? I can just hold on what I'm doing. Or if I'm really doing something that's like crazy important, I can babe, I'm gonna call you back. You know, let me call you back in 5 minutes. You know, you work around it. It's like technology is a good thing. You also have to use wisdom to understand, you know, how to be Ha'aretz, you know what I'm saying, as people of the land. It's like knowing how to use the land and the resources that God has given and be a good steward of it. I mean, I think that's really, you know, that's part of Paul's teaching. That's what Jesus taught. I think that's foreign to most of us because we grew up in this capitalist society where, and then there's nothing wrong with capitalism unless you are so extreme that you can't realize the difference. You know what I'm saying? You have no balance. You know, it's just like socialism with a dictator who isn't sharing is bad because the people are starving and the dictator just sitting there chilling. You know, he's living a life of luxury. You know, the same way that capitalists greed. You know, you see the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street. You know, these people who feel like they're at the bottom feel like they're being ignored. You know, it's that same principle of the haves and the have-nots. You know, if you look at Jesus' principle and what Paul, who followed suit, he stated, sell everything you have, give the money to the poor, and come follow me. That's what Jesus said. Jesus said it to the rich young ruler. The ruler was sad. He pouted and walked off. Jesus felt sorry for him, but he didn't change what he had to say to him. I mean, I was just kidding. Come on, he didn't say that, and that's not the case. If you step outside of it and think about it for a second, if you sell everything you have and give the money to the poor, then you're poor. But so, in essence, you kind of get your money back, but you gain friends because you've given to other poor people. You've met their needs. Now they're friends with you. They'll probably share with you. So it's a deeper level of interdependency that's going on that a lot of times we don't really think about. And as we see in the scripture, that rich young ruler couldn't wrap his mind around. That's why he went away sad, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm gonna sell my stuff and I'm gonna get rid of it and I'm gonna follow you. All of this, the point I'm trying to make is all of this, bringing it back to Paul and his experience. Paul used anything and everything that he could to make Jesus' message more accessible. What Paul did, being the Ha'aretz that he was, knowing how to work, be part of the land, not just milking the land for everything it's worth, but at the same time being in a Greco-Roman society enough that he knew how to reach them. Like say for example with Acts 17, Mars Hill, he saw the all the statues, and he sees one to the unknown God, and he knows who God is, but he uses this as, let me tell you about who this God is. This guy that you worship here, but you don't know who he is. Let me tell you. Let me sit down. Let me chew the fat with you. Let me talk to you. So he educates him, and then, to be honest with you, a lot of people, it sits there converted, if I'm not mistaken. So what I'm saying is, like, you have to use what's around you. You can't just be like, so holier now that nobody can relate to you, but you can't be, a Christian that's just like all praise, just praise the Lord, praise the Lord, praise the Lord, but no substance, no logic, no understanding. Because if you're like that, then, when people who are intellectual, they're like, okay, we're praising the Lord, but why? What specifically, how, because some people weren't raised in church, they don't see, they don't have the same experiences that we do. So, we can't just be like, with certain people like that, We have to help them make sense of it. We have to help them wrap their mind around what it is that we love Jesus for. Like, you know, because a lot of times with a lot of people it seems like fairy tales and just you know, my imaginary friend and type of thing. But if you know enough about the precepts and the concepts and the paradigms that Jesus really taught on, then you can help it make more sense to people. You know, to a point where they can say, "Oh, I can wrap my mind around it. I like that. You know what? That makes sense." You know, the apostle. I'm sorry, not the apostle. The minister of Buddhism. I'm not exactly sure if he's a minister. I'm not even sure if they even had that rank or whatever. But the philosopher Mahatma Gandhi in the 40s, I believe it was, when the British were occupying India. You know, they were trying to convert him to Christianity. He read all these books. He's like, "I like you, Jesus Christ, but I don't like your Christians." You know, even though, you know, and I'm not exactly sure if he ever followed Christ or if he ever converted to Christianity, whatever you want to call it. But just the fact that he said that, like, that should be like a, you know, a red flag should go up in your mind, in your thought process. It's like, at what point, nobody should ever say that. Like, that is really, there shouldn't be that contrast. Like, we should be little Christ. That's what Christian means, little Christ. Like, Christ wannabe. You know what I'm saying? That's what it means. It was first created as a sarcastic, actually like derogatory. You think you're little Christ. You think you just like him. That's what it's supposed to be. So, with that being said, nobody should ever say, "I like him, but I don't like y'all." You know, we should look so much like him that they love him and they love being around us because we're like him. But if we are so different from him that we push people away, well, look at Matthew 23, verse 13. Just a moment. Sorry for the delay. Woe to you, Pharisees. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you pretenders, because you lock the kingdom of heaven before mortals. You neither enter, nor you give up to enter. Or, in other words, we've changed the wording a little bit just to kind of have to make sense. If you're such a poor example that you lock the door in people's faces, you have to reevaluate your tactics. You have to reevaluate. You can't be a mindless Christian. That's not what God called us to do. That's not what He created us to be. You know, I'm not saying that everybody's going to be as intellectual as Paul. I wish I was as intellectual as Paul. But that aside, intellect aside, it's like you have to do what you can to make Christianity relatable and explainable to people around you. You can't just be mindless praise. Don't get me wrong, He's worthy of praise that just don't make sense. And He's just, you know, the things He done, the sacrifice He made, it's worthy of praise. It's worthy of, man, I was on my way to hell. I was on my way to the lake of burning fire. And you allowed people, you allowed feeble little people just like me, cut me, I bleed. You allowed them to crucify you for my sake. You took me out of hell. Thank you for that. Thank you. Like, for real. Thank you for that. Like, that aside, like, when you help people understand that, when you help people understand not only that, but the psychological, you know, emotional all the benefits of Jesus' ministry. Don't just make it seem like it's some spook. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times we get so spiritual, we get so caught up in everything that we neglect the reality. Don't forget that he was fully God and fully man. You can't have one without the other. You can't just say, well, he was that man who went around casting out demons and this, that, and other. Because you also have to factor in the fact that after God rose him from the dead, he's sitting at the right hand of the Father. He's still pleading our case to this day. Now I'm probably way off topic, but I think this really falls under the how should we approach the differences. Kind of still talking about that. Still talking about how our society is so caught up in the minor details that we don't really focus on the purpose and the point of Christianity, the benefits of what Jesus really came here to do, and the points that Paul was trying to illuminate to us. But in a sense, just as he used his dual citizenship to make a spiritual message approachable and attainable to anyone who might hear, we should follow suit. Jesus was a friend of sinners. The religious right of his day never understood that he was rewriting religion, so there wouldn't only be a misguided attempt to commune with the invisible God, but it would actually be fellowship between God and mortals, regardless of the caste system, regardless of all these man-made divisions and denominations and all this extra facades and hoopla. I just really want to I'm probably rambling, I apologize, but let me just close out with reading James 1:26 and 27. If any among you think he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their trouble and keep oneself unspotted from the world. I hope all this has been a blessing to you. I hope, I admit it's kind of been rushed. I kind of, staying up late trying to do these and trying to put something together. I hope it's coherent, cohesive, and hope you learn something. Hopefully it's been a blessing to you spiritually, mentally, emotionally. Hopefully I said something that really touched your heart and helped you deepen your understanding of Jesus and Paul and his etymology his epistemology. But it's about 3:15, so it's time to call it a night.